So, the RWBY community is exploding, in a good way. Mostly. We'll get to that. Rooster Teeth, or rather Crunchyroll, again, we'll get to that, put out the first full trailer this week for RWBY Volume 9, giving us a better idea of what to expect from the volume, including the release date, which is February 18th, for those of you who don't know, less than a month away. I suppose that's one way to make me sit down and focus on making a video. Now, the circumstances of how RWBY will be on release is a bit different this time around, and again, we'll get to that. For now, though, I'm going to go through the trailer scene by scene and break it down, but first I'm going to give my general opinion of the trailer and what it shows to us of Volume 9. First and foremost, Team RWBY is 100% in Wonderland, flat out. The trailer shows us that this world they've fallen in, the Ever After, is basically Alice's Wonderland, which makes sense. RWBY has always been heavily influenced by fairy tales, both those of our own world and the ones that exist within the setting. And as we know, most of these tales have at least a modicum of truth attached to them. The girl in the tower, the four maidens, the brothers, and of course, Alex's journey through the world. That last one in particular seems like it's going to be very important for Volume 9. I liked how the trailer initially had more of a lighthearted tone. I don't want RWBY to lose its sense of humor, even with things darker than they've ever been for our heroes. That said, I also liked how the tone shifted to a darker one halfway through, showing both that the Ever After is not a safe place, and that things are bad. Atlas has fallen, and Salem has 2 of the 4 relics, to say nothing of Penny's death and the displacement of an entire nation's people. Much like the teaser last year, this trailer asks an important question. Who is Ruby Rose? A question that, after everything that's happened, needs to be answered. And perhaps it isn't asking it of just RWBY, but all of Team RWBY, as well as Neo and John. Speaking of, this trailer, like the teaser, had a distinct lack of John. Or did it? We'll get into that as well later on. All in all, I am very excited for the new volume of RWBY. I think the Ever After is going to be like nothing we have ever seen in the setting before, and I am very interested to see what is in store for us. I think this volume will be slower paced than Volume 8, which should give us time for some character growth and interaction, especially with how hard they've been pushing that very thing as a driving narrative for the volume. The opening of the trailer starts with RWBY asking where she is, then cuts to all of Team RWBY standing together on an outcropping, overlooking the landscape of the Ever After. We see the same shot in the teaser, but we'll get a better look later that shows that each of these biomes are on their own mesas or perhaps islands, and separated by a large gap in between each. We then get 2 shots of 2 very different landscapes. The first is a series of rolling hills topped by a large town. All of the plant life appears to be shades of red, and the sky is green. The colors honestly remind me of Forever Fall Forest, all the way back in Volume 1, which feels like it was forever ago. Am I right? No? Alright then. The second shot is of a fungal forest with bioluminescent mushrooms growing from the ground or on trees, all glowing different hues. Interestingly, some of them are growing within planter boxes, and are more or less in rows, indicating that someone has been growing and harvesting them. We also see a pile of totally not suspicious leaves right on the path RWBY is walking. We then get a series of short cuts showing the girls in various situations. RWBY meeting Little, Weiss and Blake wrapped up by vines and either being rescued or kidnapped by an army of mice, and Yang fighting a toy soldier of some kind for her arm. All the while, Weiss narrates their various misadventures, all of which seem to have taken place before they reunited. We then get a shot of Weiss that I know for a fact is going to be a meme, because a friend of mine has already made it into a meme. In the next shot, we see the very same talking raccoon that stole Yang's arm on a stage, putting on some kind of show, likely selling or displaying his wares. How do I know it's the same raccoon and I'm not just being speciesist towards all talking raccoons everywhere? Because we can see what looks like a scepter in the background, sporting some very familiar bits and pieces on its frame. I'm sure Yang will be entirely alright with her arm being both stolen and cannibalized for parts. This definitely will not end with a raccoon getting punched in the face. In the next shot, RWBY is running after what appears to be the equivalent of the Cheshire Cat in the Ever After down a ramp and through a door. A ramp that also appears to be a sideways staircase. We see 2 more of the toy soldiers marching down a different set of stairs, so this could be some kind of palace that RWBY has infiltrated. The entire scene is reminiscent of M.C. Escher's Relativity painting, though not as trippy. Also, for some reason, I found how RWBY is running in this very funny. For whatever reason, it put me in mind of a classic Scooby-Doo chase scene with her running down the ramp and through the door behind the cat. That's right, even RWBY is doing Scooby-Doo better than Scooby-Doo is right now. The next cut shows us RWBY sitting at a table with a chessboard laid out on it, with her seeming to be playing as white as her opponent plays black, or red in this case. The individual sitting across from her can't be easily seen, but is clearly small, perhaps child-sized, and wearing a crown of some kind. Perhaps the equivalent of the Red Queen in the Ever After. We also see Weiss, Blake, and Yang shrunken down and acting as pieces on the board. I tried to think of a haha Weiss is short joke to squeeze in there, but couldn't think of a good one. Forgive me. We also have someone, I'm assuming her chess opponent, asking RWBY why she wants to go to the tree, to which she responds that they want to go home, they being Team RWBY and possibly Jean and Neo if they've encountered them by now, and they believe that the tree can take them home. We get a new shot of the biomes we saw earlier, showing them from a different angle, and can see clearly that each one is cut off from each other by a large canyon with a greenish fog or perhaps smoke rising from it. Most likely not somewhere you'd want to be, meaning that traveling from one biome to another could be challenging. We can also see more biomes outside of the ones we've previously seen, and the tree. Besides Candyland is what looks like a mountain of melting ice cream, one guess as to where Neo wound up, but beyond that is a rocky mountainous biome that looks devoid of life, at least as far as I can tell. In fact, many of the landscapes in the background look like they could be mountainous or barren, unlike the ones in the front that are vibrant and colorful. On the right side of the shot, we see a biome with 2, maybe 3 volcanoes on it. 2 of the possible volcanoes are venting smoke into the sky, and I am guessing that this is where the woman in armor, who I've previously hypothesized is Alex, is located, since thus far every instance of her we've seen has her in a fiery area. Behind that, we see another mountainous area, though this one looks like it's blanketed in snow or maybe ash. It is beside at least 2 active volcanoes after all. And another one to the right off in the background that looks like it might be forested. We can see what looks like waterfalls pouring down its side, and now that I'm looking closer, I can see a purple biome right in front of that, and behind the one that looks like it's made out of paper mache or something. I really don't know how to describe that one. And then of course, in the center of it all is the tree that Team RWBY wants to reach, which as far as we know is the only way out of the Ever After and back to Remnant. The next shot is of RWBY on the beach, having just arrived in the Ever After. Not much to say on this one. In the next shot, however, we see the Cheshire Cat, who is currently in 2 halves, all to facilitate a butt joke. Never change, RWBY. Never change. Also, the Cheshire Cat is voiced by Dorian's still Robbie Daymond, so that's pretty cool. The next shot is of Blake tangled in vines and trying to reach for her weapon as she says that they don't know how to get to the tree. And in the immediate next shot, we see even more vines rush towards her to wrap her up and nothing else. Some people in this community, I swear. After that, we see RWBY and the Cheshire Cat floating on a large lily pad towards some structure in the middle of this lake that looks like it was built around or grew out of a massive lotus flower. There are others on their own pads, denizens of the Ever After, drifting towards the same building. What its purpose is remains to be seen, but judging by the giant glowing mushrooms along the tree line, they're in the fungal forest biome, which from what we've seen of the island's overall layout, to be the last one before you reach the tree itself. Perhaps this is near the end of the volume and Team RWBY is in the home stretch, or perhaps they'll reach the tree early only to find their way blocked or themselves turned away until they can complete some task or prove themselves worthy in some way. And the next shot I would guess is her in the structure, judging by the pillars supporting what appears to be a walkway above head. After that, we get the Cheshire Cat being a cat, and over all 3 of these quick sequences, the Cheshire Robbie explains in his dulcet tones that they can't go to the tree and instead it has to come to them. Unless, of course, they're him. Meaning that the cat may be able to lead them to the tree and thus why RWBY is following him. Or he's deceiving them or not telling them everything they need to know. From what we've seen and heard from him so far, the Cheshire Cat seems like a bit of a duplicitous being, which would be in line with the original tale of Alice in Wonderland. Perhaps he's leading them to somewhere or someone other than the tree, either in service to someone in the Ever After or just because he's an asshole. My money's on the former, but the latter would be funny. We then get a shot of Small Yang in RWBY's hoodie looking entirely unimpressed with the cat, and then the trailer undergoes a dramatic shift in tone. We see the same pile of leaves from the teaser and earlier in this same trailer, and see the same 3 eyes poking out from it. The creature inside asks the question that summarizes this volume's theme. What are you? Next we see Yang standing on a rickety wooden bridge over a very long fall, a broken bridge, as a woman says that someone was never the hero. Despite the fact that Yang is in the shot, I don't think that she is the one this statement is directed at. RWBY or Jean is a more likely candidate for that since their story arcs revolve around a desire to be a hero. Ahead of Yang on the other end of the gap in the bridge is a stone pillar that descends down past the clouds to the ground below. Most likely, this pillar is what she is trying to reach for whatever reason. In what is perhaps the most interesting shot of this trailer, the next clip shows us present-day RWBY kneeling before her younger self from her Beacon days in a smoke-shrouded, almost dreamscape-like landscape. Her young self asks the most important question of the volume. What are you gonna be? And in the very next clip, we see a very angry Neo take RWBY's form. Considering that this volume is going to be asking the question of who are you a lot and handling identity, Neo and her semblance can make for some very interesting answers to that question. If you haven't already, I encourage you to read the RWBY novel Roman Holiday to fill yourself in on Neo's history and connection to Roman. Or at the very least, reading up on it from the wiki. I have a feeling that Neo's backstory is going to be of some importance in this volume. Next, we see RWBY holding one of Penny's blades, meaning that it fell into the Ever After with them. Which also means that Penny's body would have wound up in the Ever After too. And if RWBY found one of her blades, then it's likely that her body is close by. Though I think that by this point she's already aware of Penny's end. As we'll see later, the first she learns of it will most likely be from Weiss explaining what happened after she fell. Over this shot and the shot of Neo, we have a woman, the same one from earlier, talking to perhaps RWBY, saying that someone has a rather large burden. We then see another, much clearer shot of the woman in fire from the teaser. I've previously hypothesized in my first video that this woman is Alex, and I still stand by this theory. I also stated in that video that she seemed to have prosthetic arms, and now that we've gotten a much clearer shot of her and can see more of her, it isn't just her arms. Most, if not all of her body seems to be mechanical, which, if this is Alex, could explain how she's still alive. While we don't know if time flows the same in the Ever After as Remnant, the story of Alex is an old one and has probably been around for decades at least, if not longer. By this point, Alex may be entirely mechanical, save for a few key parts, such as the spine very clearly running up her back. In fact, her hair doesn't even really look like hair. It looks more like wires or cables. At this point, it may be that all that's left of Alex, or whoever this woman is a brain and a spinal column. Maybe not even that much. Then we see RWBY with Tiny Yang, Tiny Blake, and normal-sized Weiss, yes, in the collar of her hood entering a building of some kind in the fungal forest. What immediately stands out to me here is the background. We can see 2 hourglasses, what looks like 2 teapots, and a beaker of some kind. I'm not really sure what to call that. I'm not really knowledgeable about these things. What really interests me, however, is that glowing globe. That looks like a piece of Atlas tech to me, and if it is, then that means that things have been falling into the Ever After for a long time now. In fact, all of those items look like they could be from Remnant, so perhaps this is the home of a scavenger or hoarder who collects the bits and pieces that somehow find their way into the Ever After. Perhaps this is even the home of the talking raccoon that nicked Yang's arm. The next 3 shots show Weiss, Blake, and Yang in quick succession. Blake seems to be surrounded by fog, while Yang is in a jungle and missing her harm. Her harm. No, I'm going to keep that in. But it's Weiss that interests me most. The glowing purple thing in the background initially put me in mind of the crystals that grow in the Land of Darkness, where Salem's castle is located. But those are a much darker shade of purple. While it could still be a crystal of some kind, my mind leaned more towards it being a large glowing fungus, putting this in the fungal forest if I'm right. Weiss's expression here is one of shock, or even fear, making me wonder just what she's seeing to inspire that kind of reaction from her. More likely than not, it isn't anything good. Immediately after, we see what at first kind of looks like Zwei, but is in reality the raccoon from earlier. Not much to say on that, except a lot of people thought it was Y or another dog. Then we get a look at what initially seems to be the creature hiding in the pile of leaves from earlier, but there's a couple of key distinctions. The background is different from that scene, red and kind of angry looking instead of the gloomier darkness we've seen from the fungal forest, though it looks like it could still be in that forest since that thing off to the right looks like some kind of weird mushroom. But the other difference is that this moth, butterfly thing has green eyes, whereas the one in the leaf pile has blue eyes. Though that doesn't mean it has to be a different individual. It's dropping a clump of the same kind of leaves from its hands, so it could very well be the same one and his eyes just change color based on his mood, or it could be the lighting of the scene, or any number of other things. Or there are people just really like hiding in clumps of leaves. Also, he's holding what kind of looks like a jump rope of all things in one of his hands. Maybe that home we saw earlier with the various bits is his and he's a collector of sorts. And in the next shot, I feel like I've been saying that a lot, we see a bird flying towards the camera and looking rather peeved. Initially, I didn't think there was much to talk about here, but after I grabbed a couple screenshots and looked them over, I noticed something that grabbed my attention. See that blue light coming from the bird's eyes? Where have we seen that kind of effect before? That's right, from the maidens. Now granted, it doesn't look the exact same. This is a stream of light, whereas for the maidens, it's literal fire coming from the eyes. But for this little bird to have a similar thing and also share Winter's color palette of white and blue is interesting. Am I overanalyzing it? Probably, but that's pretty much what I've been doing this whole video. Also, the bird is wearing a little hat, and that's just adorable. Additionally, we get another look at the structure RWBY traveled to via Lilypad, and judging by the stall setup, this is clearly some kind of market area, so that answers my earlier question of what this place could be. Next, we get a shot of the creature of darkness looking beast we saw in the teaser looking just as weird as ever. There's all kinds of speculation about what it could be, with the prevailing theory I've seen being that this is the Jabberwocky of the Ever After. If that does wind up being the case, then that means whoever is going to kill it is going to need a Vorpal sword. And who do we know in the Ever After who needs a blade? That's right, Jean Sadboy Arc. I won't go into much detail about it here, but Phoenix Knight put up a video a few days ago theorizing that Jean will take on the role of the nameless hero that slew the Jabberwocky with the Vorpal sword, and from what very little we can be reasonably sure of regarding Jean in the Ever After, mainly that he'll need a new sword, will be incredibly emotionally vulnerable, and is likely to be the knight we saw in the teaser, or at least connected to them in some way. These all could make for a very interesting story arc focusing on Jean. While Team RWBY and perhaps Neo are going to be going on more emotional journeys as they try to answer the question of what are you, Jean's journey may be more focused on perhaps redeeming himself in a more physical way. He took Penny's life, regardless of the circumstances at the time, and in order to cleanse himself of that stain, he has to hunt down and slay the Jabberwocky. Now, that isn't me saying that's how he should try to redeem himself. In fact, I don't think he needs to undergo any kind of redemption, considering that he was in what was just an awful situation, but that doesn't mean he doesn't think he needs to. And it doesn't mean that he won't be manipulated into thinking he does as well. I did a whole video on this topic. In fact, it's the first one I ever put up. Go check it out after this one. But to summarize, I think that the blacksmith/mechanical woman is Alex, and I think that she in some way binds Jean to her service for whatever reason, and he becomes the knight we see in the teaser. Again, made a whole video on that, so go and watch it if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that matter. Additionally, I've put a link to Phoenix Knight's video in the description for anyone who wants to go and check that out, which I encourage you to do. And in the next shot, I should put up a counter for how many times I've said that, we see Salem. My guess is on this being an illusion or a nightmare that someone, likely RWBY, is suffering from. Though really, it could be any of our heroes on the island at this point, even Neo. Salem's kind of fucked up all their lives pretty extensively. After that, we have a shot of the chessboard, or rather table, being flung aside by someone as the pieces, including Blake, Weiss, and Yang, go flying. I would guess that RWBY's opponent has lost and isn't taking that fact all too well, as we'll see in a bit. Next, we see Yang punching the Jabberwocky thing, and if that is indeed the Jabberwocky equivalent, then that likely isn't going to work out all that well for her. Interestingly, if you look on the creature's back, you can see some kind of pattern on it. I'm not really sure what it is, but it could be a natural pattern that the creature has, or some kind of marking or even brand that's been put on it. Next, we get a shot of the chess game in action, and it looks like the pieces actively engage one another in combat rather than just being picked up if they're taken. Which in turn means that the lives of RWBY's teammates could be endangered in the game. Another thing worth noting is that the white piece we see looks like it's been put through the ringer more than once. It and its sword are dirty, chipped, and just generally damaged, while the red piece looks pretty much pristine, which in turn lends credence to the thought that RWBY's opponent, most likely Ever After's Red Queen, isn't used to losing and doesn't take it well. The very next shot, we see a Mecha Shift gun axe, much like what you would see back on a Remnant, hanging next to a collection of other weapons. However, this is not the first time we've seen this weapon in the trailer. We see toy soldiers carrying them in the background of the shot of the chess table being flipped over, though they're blurry, as well as two more in the scene where RWBY follows the Cheshire Cat down that ramp in that trippy stairwell being carried by two more toy soldiers. I would hazard a guess and say that Alex is responsible for the existence of these weapons and makes them for the Red Queen as part of an alliance of some kind between them. She may even make the Queen soldiers as well, meaning that the Red Queen's power could rely very heavily on the support of Alex. If this is the case, then it'll be interesting to see why Alex is giving her that support in the first place. The next shot, I swear I'm going to stop saying that soon, shows us a rabbit? In fact, looking at the shadow below it, I think it's safe to say that this is definitely some kind of rabbit. You can kind of make out its ears on top of its head, as well as the silhouette of its face from the shadow it casts, and it looks very rabbity. Which makes the answer to the question who is riding the rabbit even more interesting. You see that boot resting against the side of the rabbit? Does that boot look familiar? If it doesn't, it should, because that is almost the exact same as John's boots from his Volume 7 outfit, right down to the brass button on the side. The only difference is the greave covering the rider's lower leg, which is itself in line with the coloring of the knight's armor from the teaser. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The knight is Jean, and this only further adds to that conclusion. While the circumstances of how or why this has happened to him are unclear, I am absolutely convinced that it is him, and I am hyped to see what they do with that. And on top of all of that, Jean once again has a cute little bunny rabbit, and I am all for it. Finally, in the home stretch, we get a very clear look at the face of the Red Queen, and they don't look happy. I'd guess this is right after they've lost the chess game to RWBY and are taking it less than well, if the fact that their face is literally breaking apart is any indicator. We get Yang looking like she's meditating in the midst of a thunderstorm, probably on that bridge from earlier. We see Blake walking through a curtain of vines with the other girl sitting in the background. With how her ears are perked up, she looks like something has caught her attention. Fortunately, the vines don't seem inclined to tangle her up again and encourage people of dubious reputation to create art of a particular variety. But on a more somber note, we then have Weiss in tears as she talks. This is almost certainly where she tells him about Penny's untimely end and what Jean was forced to do. And then, in the final shot of the trailer, we see RWBY in the same scene with a shocked expression right before she tips over and passes out. And over all of this, from the shot of RWBY walking in that house with the globe to her passing out, we have the same woman ask RWBY a very heavy question. What if you could leave Ruby Rose behind, shed like an old coat? What might happen if you don't? All in all, I think this trailer has done a very good job of getting the RWBY community hyped up for Volume 9. A lot of people, myself included, have theorized for a while that this volume is going to be much more character-focused, particularly on the folks that fell into the void, and so far it seems like we're getting just that. The Ever After looks like it's going to be a wild place, and easily the most unique environment we've ever seen in RWBY. It is a shame that we'll likely only be getting it for a single volume before we return to Remnant, but I feel like the volume is going to be making the most of it, and we're all going to have a lot of enjoyment from the wild things we'll see. I was going to also discuss my thoughts on RWBY's current state as a Crunchyroll exclusive, but this script is already 8 pages long and will likely be sitting at 9 before I'm done, and I would like to get this video out before the volume actually airs. So I'll give you a summary of what I think on the matter and go in more depth into it in a future video that I'll try to have out before the volume airs on the 18th of this month. But long story short, this is most likely the result of a deal that Rooster Teeth made with Crunchyroll that can be summarized as, hey, if you throw a bucket of money at us, we'll premiere Volume 9 and all other future RWBY productions exclusively on your platform. I don't know if the author of this deal was RT, Crunchyroll, or Big Daddy Warner Bros., but that's my guess on why it happened. For those of you who don't know this already and wonder what the hell I'm talking about, Volume 9 is airing exclusively on Crunchyroll and won't even be available on Rooster Teeth's own site until a year later, even for first members. So what does this mean for you and me? Well, first and foremost, all RWBY content that is currently available on Rooster Teeth's site is going to stay there as well. So you can watch all of the volumes 1 through 8 on Rooster Teeth's site, as well as additional content like Ice Queendom. It'll just also be available on Crunchyroll up until Volume 9, at which point it will be exclusive to Crunchyroll for a good long while. If you have a Crunchyroll account already, then you're good to go. If you don't have one and do have a first membership and we're only using it for RWBY content, well, considering that all RWBY content is going to be available on Crunchyroll, from the core show to Ice Queendom to World of Remnant and the Grimm campaign, you can probably just swap out your RT First subscription for a Crunchyroll subscription. That's what I'll be doing at any rate, since I've got plenty of anime on my to-watch list anyhow, so I'll likely be getting a lot more out of it regardless. And if you have neither an RT First or a Crunchyroll subscription and don't want to get either, well, you have alternative options. I'm sure if you know where to look and a willingness to don a tricorn hat, you can probably find a way to watch Volume 9. Now, I am not condoning this, of course, merely acknowledging that it exists, and I'm not the only one. In their statement regarding the choice to put RWBY on Crunchyroll, Rooster Teeth made it very clear that they really don't want people to pirate the show. Whether or not that plea will stop someone who's made the decision to do so remains to be seen. But that is everything I have for this video. Sorry it took me so long to get another one put out. I work a full-time job and have other dedications or hobbies I take part in as well, so I haven't been putting as much focus on my videos or my fanfictions as I should be. That's not to say I've just been busy and haven't had a chance to stop and work on videos. It's also just been some good old-fashioned procrastination on my part along with everything else. For any of you who care, Chapter 28 of Griffin Knight is still underway. I swear it won't take me 2+ years to update like before. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. With Volume 9 right around the corner, I plan to put out reviews for each episode a week after they air. They'll probably be more off the cuff than this, probably with just some bullet points to discuss along with my thoughts rather than a full script for the whole video like this one. Because I swear script writing is like half the work by itself for making these videos, though that's probably my fault for going into tangents and spending too much time on one topic. Kind of like how I'm doing now. If you want to support me monetarily, then please consider going over to my Patreon, link in the description below, and becoming a patron of mine. Full disclosure, at the moment I'm not really in a position to deliver on some of the things I want to do with my Patreon that I have listed there. So at the moment, you'd just be supporting me out of the kindness of your heart. Which, don't get me wrong, I would appreciate greatly, but until I've managed to get myself on a regular uploading schedule for both videos and fanfiction content, I don't want any of you to think that I can give you something extra for doing so that I can't currently give you. Regardless, if you do choose to support me over there, I will really appreciate it more than I can say with words, even if it's just $1, and if you can't, then I would once again encourage you to subscribe for future content like this and like the video, as well as leaving a comment with your own thoughts on the trailer and what we'll see in Volume 9. It really does help the channel grow. Regardless, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and never forget to keep moving forward.